All right. Well, hopefully everybody heard our first show together and they realize, I'll say it again, that our spark types from your spark assessment, ours are similar. Ours are the first ones are dead on. We're maker scientists. So in that, I'm really curious to see or to hear about some of your habits, since your bio lines up with me as a maker, scientist, architect, and a lover of dark chocolate. So
Of course.
of course. So let's start off with health. So physical, nutrition, exercise, diet. What are your key habits there? And you said when we talked before that you didn't say which ones, but some of these have evolved. They have changed in recent times. So tell me first on the health wellness side.
Yeah. So for me, and it's funny because I don't make a distinction between health and wellness and career and productivity and work and relationships with these particular habits because they affect everything. There are two things that I do first thing in the morning. And they've been disrupted a bit over the last year and a half because we've become semi-nomadic, and actually we spend most of our time in Colorado now. We're sort of now officially residents of Colorado.
God bless you for
being
that. Yeah.
right after being New Yorkers for 30 years. And but the two things I do, I wake up first thing in the morning, and I lie in bed, and then I do a breathing practice, so pranayama, and it's a practice that I've developed myself over time, where it's a breath slowing practice. So sometimes people will do a morning breathing practice where it's designed to energize and to activate your system. I find for me, I want to be in a really grounded space first thing in the morning. So I do a practice that actually lengthens the pauses between my breaths and lengthens my breaths, especially with the exhale, so that I pretty quickly am breathing only twice a minute for that particular type of practice. And it sounds a little bit weird because the average person breathes, I think, 16 times a minute. So to go from 16 to 2 sounds like, well, how is that possible and feel okay? It's taken, a long, probably years to sort of like slowly bring myself there, but it feels completely natural and sustainable for me. And I feel like it immediately it creates a sort of a systemic stillness in my system that's really powerful. I do this one other thing, and I've been doing it for years now. While I'm doing that, I transition then into about a 25-minute mindfulness meditation. And while I'm doing that, I place my left hand over my heart, over my chest, and my right hand over my abdomen. And there's something, you can talk about the subtle body and prana and the chakras and all of these things if you're somebody who goes down that route. You can talk about the nerve plexus and sort of like the nervous system and how we respond to touch and heat. I don't know what the actual physiology, modern or subtle or ancient physiology of this is. All I know is that when I do that, it feels like there's a circuit that somehow connects for my whole body to just down regulate into this place of peace. And I do that also if I'm anxious. If I'm going through a stressful time, I'll just kind of sit and I'll place, like a hand over my heart and a hand over my abdomen, and something changes. And it's really powerful. So I'll do that to start every single day. And then that's how I move into the day. And what I found is that it's the type of practice that allows me to start the day in a grounded place, but also it's the practice where over months and years, and I'm doing this, like well over 10 years now, it just changes the way you move through the day. It changes the way that you respond to stressors and to things that come your way that throw you into states of uncertainty where the stakes are high. You're still going to potentially get knocked back by it. But for me, at least, I can dip into a place of equanimity quicker and be more able to sort of zoom a meta lens out and be more responsive than reactive. And that's really powerful for me.
Well, yeah, it strikes me as you're growing that muscle of awareness, of being present, of being calm. And that is, I tend to think about that more and more of, am I training that? I understand physical fitness. I get it. I've done that my entire life. I've been a pro athlete. I get that one. But I actually had Kate Ekman on the show recently, and she's talking about how can you do that for your spirit? So your mental state is fit. How do you work it out? Gosh, I don't have no file for that. So thanks for sharing that. How about on the people are always interested, as am I, if you have any specific literal eating, dietary, nutritional habits that you follow?
Yeah. And more broadly, also beyond that, I try and move my body as much as I can when I'm like out in the mountains. I'll just go walk a lot. but maybe we'll circle back to that because that actually weaves into my work habits too.
Okay.
So nutrition wise, um, I don't track calories. I don't eat a wildly restrictive diet, but what I try and do is emphasize eating as much whole food, as much of a plant-based diet. I do eat meat and I eat fish, but I'll try and eat wild caught fish and grass-fed beef when I do that. And as much plant and as much organic based plant material as possible. I tend to stay away from gluten and dairy also, simply because it just doesn't feel great in my system.
Yeah. Exercise. You want to come back to that
Yeah.
in the work?
Well,
Okay.
we can talk about that, but it also, I kind of weave it into the way that I work because I've
Well,
sort
just
of
tell. Yeah. Let me know.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Tell me about
so, so, I think when I was younger, I was much more aggressive in the way I moved my body. When I did yoga, and I taught yoga for 7 years and owned a yoga center in New York, it was a very aggressive vinyasa flow style of yoga, kind of like pushing a lot. My body is just, I'm 55 now. My body is not down for that at this point. I've been through too many injuries. I've been, rehab too many times. And so I've, learned to have to treat my body differently. So what I generally love doing these days is, I'll do some basic, physical movement or calisthenics or weight work, but then I just love being outdoors. I love cycling. I love walking or hiking in the mountains. There's something about being in nature while I'm moving my body that is incredibly powerful to me. And in fact, there's fascinating research. Like there's a phrase, Japanese phrase, Shinrin Yoku, which translates roughly to forest bathing. And there are in fact entire forests in Japan that are designated as Shinrin Yoku forests because of the effect of being in nature on your mindset, your physiology. Even down regulating inflammatory markers is really powerful. And when you can combine that with movement, I found that that's kind of a magical thing for me. It's a bit of a reset for me. And the tie-in I was going to make to work, if you want me to go there now,
Yeah.
is so when I thought about my workflow, I realized that, like you, I spent a lot of time in the digital creation, ecosystem. And that very often means a lot of time sitting. So what I'll try and do is when I'm home, I'm not doing it right now, but very often if I'm on first, over the last year and a half, the default mode of, meetings, conversations has become video calls. And my default answer to that is no. I absolutely do not want to be tethered to a computer where I'm in a fixed place unless I have to. If there's a thing that I have to do or see on video, then let's do it. Barring that, if it can be a phone call, let's make it a phone call. And the reason for that is this: I tend to think a lot better when I'm moving. And I don't want to be locked to being static, So when I'm on a call, I'll always take it on a headset and I'm either walking around my interior space. I will probably walk miles, just kind of pacing around on the inside. Or if I have access to the outdoors, I'll just head outside. I have had so many meetings, like high level important meetings, when I'm actually walking along a trail in the mountains or, like outside in a park or something like that. And I'll tell people sometimes in advance, hey, listen, you may hear a little bit of wind. You may hear kids playing in the background if I'm walking by a school or something like that. It's because I take all of my meetings, like they're all walk and talks. And I do the same thing in person too, by the way. It's rare that I'll actually have a sit down meeting with someone. I'll basically say, let's meet at this place and bring your, bring your sneakers or your running shoes because we're going to go and walk and talk. So I want to mobilize my workflow because the research that I've seen over the last decade is that it's not really enough to sit 8 to 10 hours a day and then work out for 45 minutes for an hour. It doesn't offset the damage that's being done by being static for so long. So rather than just saying I'm going to work out for this designated amount of time, I want to actually figure out ways to completely reimagine and mobilize my workflow throughout the day as much as I can.
I wish that that wasn't the case because that's my go-to is generally an hour exercise, run and ride is my norm. And then I can sit for the rest of the day. But because of that research, I now have, if I scanned around my office, I have weights. I have, here's my favorite recent hack, Jonathan. For those watching the video, I have a walker. It's a great dip machine. So you can do you can do dips on it. So I get and have anytime I get up for water, coffee, go to the bathroom, I do an exercise. I have a pull-up bar at my door. And so yeah, fulfilling that because yeah, unfortunately, that's my propensity. Go really work out and do a hardcore workout for an hour and then sit still the rest of the day. Man, forest bathing. Okay, you gave that to me. I'm going to use that. That speaks to me so much. And that's where I do all of my riding and running is trails for sure. But there's something about that. And as you were talking about it, I've realized lately I've done a couple solo trips out, camping trips and just being gone for a few days. And you ever see that, like in a movie, they'll show a character like in a field or something like that. And it's almost like a drone was above them. And then it goes up hundreds of feet and it just expands and it shows their dramatic isolation. And I think it's usually meant to be kind of a negative thing. Man, that is food for my soul to be
Mhm.
out there isolated. So forest bathing, I'm going to take that from this and
Yeah.
embrace that. Relationships. Tell me about the things that you do, the habits that you put in place to nurture the relationships to where you want them to be in your life.
Yeah. So, the two relationships that are most central to me are my wife and daughter. I'm we're all super close. We have one child. So we kind of roll as, like a three people. And we're really close with each other. And that is because I think to no small extent, we really invest in being around each other. And creating space and time for each other. We're all busy. We all have a lot of stuff to do. Um, but we always want to be present, both physically present, but also psychologically and emotionally present for each other. So I work with my wife.
Yeah.
And so we are around each other, like 24/7. And on the one hand, you think, well, we must be constantly communicating. And so like there's no space for things to not be said, or there's no space for friction because, we're always there to have the conversation like all day, every day. But the truth is when you're working with your partner, um, you know, and you actually really like what you do, there can be a habit of not turning off the
Mhm.
work cycle with them, because you're always thinking about cool, fun, interesting, different things or problems to solve together. So, what I'll try and do is power down in the evenings, and, like try and step away from the work conversation. And I'll actually, we've had to, it's funny, we're around each other all day, but we'll set up, meetings for us to sit down and go through all the critical business stuff, so that it doesn't just become this perpetual state of existence between
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I tend to want to, I get up really early. I'm the first one up in my house. So I'm generally working for a few hours before anyone else is up. And then, when my wife gets up, I like to make her coffee first thing in the morning. And then we'll sit down. And if I'm doing something, I'll kind of pull away even just for a few minutes and just like have a morning check-in, to actually just sit down and have a cup of coffee together for a few minutes. I think it's a little thing, but it really is important. And I think, you know, that was actually revealed to me by Brad Feld, who's like this amazing guy and is also a venture capitalist and a founder who's out in Boulder, Colorado. And years ago, he shared that there were two things that he did with his wife that were really, really important, because his first relationship, his first wife, the relationship ended, and he didn't want that to happen the second time around. So they created these two practices. One is, I think he called it 3 minutes in the morning, where every single morning they would get up and they would just sit down and spend a couple minutes touching base with each other in the morning. The second practice was a thing that they would do every month, which is they would call them life dinners, where they would go to a restaurant, they'd exchange gifts. It could be really small, but it was just a thoughtful action. And they would talk about life together and just what was going, like all the different things. Sometimes it was a really happy conversation. Sometimes it's a really hard conversation. And it's funny. This is bringing me back to my desire to want to start doing that. We had started doing that here and there, and then we kind of dropped the habit, especially in the last year and a half. And now this is reminding me that I really want to get back to that.
Yeah. Mental is the next one. Now you started off, with the health of a primary one is how you start your day mentally. You're resetting, your programming. Are there any other continual habits that you would put in that mental space of monitoring, or again, programming is great, your mental state?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, I rely on different systems to stop me from spinning. There are
Hmm.
task management apps that I use, to make sure that things aren't just being held entirely in my head, because then that leads to anxiety. So I'm constantly pulling things out and putting things into platforms or technology that help me make sure that, I can spend my cognitive space. I can live in the question on the questions that matter most, and take all the more granular tasks and processes and just have them in a place where I know that, like I'll get to them. But also, um, it's interesting. Mentally, I think meditation is this single biggest tool in my toolbox. It just really powers so much of the way that I see and move into the world and cultivate a sense of awareness. And I'll try and not just meditate first thing in the morning, but keep touching into that space and asking myself, am I present right now? Am I present right now?
Mhm.
Because a lot of times, I'm not. And it's very much a lifelong practice. But to me, like if you can develop a level of self-awareness where you actually understand when you are and are not present, that kind of changes everything. Like that's sort of like the ultimate meta skill.
What do you do, Jonathan? I'm gonna ask a sideline question to that. When you have a given time of mentally feeling down, it's a disappointment, it's a fear, it's a something creeps in, and this is the middle of the day. Maybe you don't have the ability to stop everything and take 20 minutes and whatnot. Are there any things you do, not to minimize or make fun of it all, but we joked about dark chocolate. I mean, there's the things that you do literally to just, I need a lift.
Yeah.
I got to keep going, but I need a lift. I need inspiration even.
Yeah. Well, dark chocolate for sure.
For sure.
um,
Yeah,
yeah. But that's basically just my solution to almost every problem in life.
absolutely.
Um, Beyond that, like for me, I think movement and nature, is my thing. If I'm feeling something, if I'm anxious or if I'm stressed or if I'm kind of down, first, actually, I don't deny it, or try not to. I try and actually just say, okay, I'm actually feeling this way. And rather than saying like, I got to feel differently, sometimes actually, I think it's okay to just say, well, let me just feel this. It's real. Something hard just happened. Something sad just happened. I just lost something or something. There's a reason for me to be feeling this way. And rather than just saying, snap out of it, man, go do something to feel differently. Sometimes I think the right answer is just, let me just feel this. It's okay to feel this. It's okay to be human and actually feel the full sweep of emotions. That gives us contrast in life. And that's, I think, makes life richer. That doesn't mean that if you start to, move into a place of clinical depression or real darkness, that, it's okay to just be there. I think like then we intervene and we seek help and therapy and movement and all the things that we can try and do. But there are moments where we're struggling, or there's a sense of loss or grief or anxiety, which is or melancholy, which is kind of natural and okay. And I think when we tell ourselves that it's not okay to feel all of these things and snap out of it and change our state immediately, you know, we deny our humanity to a certain extent, and we layer a certain amount of, shame into the experience or over that experience, when we can't just immediately snap out of it because we're kind of not meant to snap out of it. From these places, very often when you allow yourselves to feel them really fully, come our greatest awakenings, our greatest learnings about ourselves and about our life and about relationships. Um, but if you just kind of try and, paint them over or snap out of them, you end up, in my mind, at least, repeating the same thing over and over and over until you just allow yourself to feel them. And again, I'm not talking about extremes that will take you to a place of mental illness. That is an entirely different thing. But I'm talking about the day-to-day shifts that we sometimes feel. I think sometimes I'll do things to just try and like feel better. But more, I think I'll do things to say, let me feel this, and then let me go for a walk or let me be in nature, where that's my way of taking care of myself while I allow myself to feel those things.
That was the mic drop for me there. Thank you for that. just literal candid admission. I That has not been a skill of mine. That is one that at 50, I'm 50, that I am now doing. I just had somebody really counsel me in that. Dude, just feel the feeling, sit in it. That was the word, sit in it. And I don't. I medicate it. I don't know if that's a fair word. That sounds bad, but I just, you said snap out of it. Man, that has been my default. And it's taken me way too long to come and allow myself to feel it, to consider it, and before I just jump past it. So
Hmm.
I'll assume I was led to ask that question because I need that repetitive message in that. Man, I know you got to go here soon. I'm going to ask one more question because it's again one that I really enjoy hearing. You probably shared a little bit of it now, just with your walks and whatnot. But the things that you do just for you personally, whether you call that self-care is good, but a lot of times that gets really, deep and meaningful, and maybe it should be, but also to come back to that, we started the show talking about play, and
Hmm.
fun or hobbies and some of the things that just light Jonathan up.
Yeah. And, we've definitely talked about some of them, nature, movement, being outside, but
Yeah.
also, I'm a maker. So that impulse to create things, I lose myself in that so easily. To me, I could be working really hard, but it's so joyful. It's so energizing, it's so filling to me that and that shows up in a lot of ways. I've started to buy little sketchbooks, and I have some pencils sitting over on the side with my desk right now. And one of my commitments is to get back to just like spending 10-15 minutes a day literally doodling in a sketchbook, just sketching,
Hmm.
and just seeing without any expectation and just seeing where it takes me, because that's that is something that just allows everything to kind of be more okay when I do it.
Beautiful. Well, hey, thank you again. Great to get the behind the scenes. I got to admit that it's probably even more interesting for me than anyone else, being that we have so much similarities, not just in, well, yeah, in propensity, in the
Yeah.
type, going back to the spark type. Um, Really interesting. Yeah, I think I've got as many questions, and maybe more. So I'll keep throwing them at you. But man, thanks for being here again and giving us a behind the scenes tour of some of the things that make Jonathan Fields tick. It's been an honor.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.